Hey, folks, welcome back. This is Cory.
And this is Dave.
And this is Scott. Praise Satan!
Praise Satan. And this is part 2 of our Wildcard rounds. Last time we thought we'd get through 8 rounds, and, we did, but it was 2 hours long.
Yeah, we're a little long-winded.
I guess Scott is speaking to you through the kalimba today.
Scott has had an errand to run. He's temporarily recording from the wind chime store.
Yes. But yes, folks, so the next show, it could be 4, it could be 8, so
you're gonna get rounds. We won't make any promises as to how many rounds you're gonna get. You're gonna get rounds.
You're gonna get rounds. And that's all we need to know, so. And when the cock crows, you know.
Scott's having a stroke right now.
And now on with part 2.
Your mom's penis! What?
Bob Dylan and the band's The Basement Tapes versus AC/DC's Back in Black. So, never meant to see the light of day, The Basement Tapes started as a series of demos of songs intended for other artists, recorded in a rented house in 1967 while Dylan was recovering from a motorcycle accident. Once Dylan was finally persuaded to release them 8 years later, the collection became a massive seller and launched Dylan's backing musicians, the band, into a successful career all their own. Back in Black was AC/DC's first album with lead singer Brian Johnson, hired after Bon Scott's early death from alcohol poisoning. It not only proved AC/DC could carry on, but is also widely regarded as one of the best albums they've ever released. And you can hear more of our thoughts on The Basement Tapes back on Season 1, Episode 5, or on Back in Black back on Season 1, Episode 3.
All right, we'll start with The Basement Tapes.
Yes.
This was the birth of the band. This was... I keep saying, this was the band. Well, they are the band.
They were at this point, they were still the Hawks. They hadn't quite changed their name to the band yet and gone solo, but yeah.
But that's what they called themselves later, was the band.
The musicianship on this is, you could tell how great everybody is in this room. And it is live. I mean, they're bootleg sessions. They're up to what, 20, 25 of these things, if not more, since it started?
Yeah. They keep finding more tapes. I mean, that's part of this. Is I think just as recently as about 10 years ago, they've actually found even more of these tapes and keep putting them out.
Wow.
Bob Dylan has to be the most prolific songwriter ever. I think we mentioned it when we talked about Leonard Cohen. It's like it took him 10 years to do Hallelujah, and he asked Dylan about how long it would take him to do one of his songs. He said 15 minutes.
Right. It's because Dylan walks around with a tape recorder on all the time. I'm just walking around my tape recorder. I might say something. Oh, it'll be amazing. It's a basement tape. Hey, here you go. $30, please.
I'm going to write a song for you right now. Hold on. What's your name? What's your favorite color? All right, give me a moment.
This is called Green Day number 4. Yeah. Here you go. Boom, done. Fuck, man. But really, it feels like that sometimes. But you had some great players on the album too, like Robbie Robertson.
Yes.
Oh, I mean the entire band. The only one you're missing from the band here is Levon Helm,
right? Who
had I forget why he had kind of. Oh, I know what it was. So Dylan had been touring electric and getting a lot of boos from his folk audiences that didn't like the fact that he was suddenly using electric instruments, and apparently all the negative feedback from audience caused Levon Helm to actually leave music for a couple of years before he came back. But yeah, this is the backing group on this is the band minus Levon Helm, basically.
Great stuff, man.
The takeaway for me when you listen to this is every once in a while you can listen to an album and actually hear how much fun the musicians in the room are having. And this is one of those moments, because this was a no pressure situation. They weren't trying to make an album. They were literally just cutting some demos that they were going to hand out to other artists in the hopes that the other artists would record these songs. So they didn't have to be perfect. It was just a demo, you know? And that I think that lack of pressure to put out something and make it a hit, they enjoyed themselves more. It was relaxed, and it actually comes through in the performance.
They were creating their own Brill building in a way. They were just the songwriters of going, yeah, here, somebody else can take this, somebody else can run with it. And what you realize in the end, I think you called it, they were having fun. Yeah. They were making music to make music. And they said, if somebody likes this, they can play it, they can use it, we don't care. we're just enjoying ourselves. We're having a jam session.
This is what happens when bands do things for themselves as opposed to other people, and that makes a huge difference in performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Now on the con side, and this is probably partly attributable to this, it's not at points the most well mixed albums in the world. You don't get a lot of clear separation of instruments. It sounds a little muddled at points and muddy at points. But again, they're recording this in the basement of a suburban house.
Right.
That was the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was never meant to see the light of day. So it's kind of unrealistic to expect that it's going to sound like some perfectly balanced wall of sound recording.
I'd say it won't be polished.
No, it's like you got someone's tape recorder, recording of a concert of somebody holding up the tape recorder as opposed to someone recording straight off the board.
Right.
Yeah, it was probably the greatest show they ever did, but you're hearing it on a cassette recorder that it wasn't meant to be heard through.
And then somebody jostled this cassette recorder. So, yeah, I mean, really.
They're dancing the whole time.
Right. It's fucking great. Yeah.
It's also a little on the long side. I could easily see somebody listening to this and not having the historical context and saying, Jesus Christ, when is this going to be over? Because not every one of these songs is compelling. This is one of those you kind of have to look at it in the context of the time. People were just so excited to have new Dylan music that they would take every single track that the record company could put out. Listening to it through the lens of 2022, it's kind of like, okay, I get it, it's good, but let's move on.
I mean, we could say they could have used a producer, but that would have defeated the whole purpose of the album.
Correct. Yeah, the producer was literally one of the guys with a reel-to-reel sitting behind the keyboards where he'd push record and then turn around and start playing.
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, on the other side, Scott, lead us in with AC/DC.
Or something like that. But anyway, yeah, fucking great album. This was beginning of metal in a sense. This was in the 80s. This was this was the sound that kind of defined that period. Aside from the new wave British heavy metal thing.
You can take practically any metal album from the 80s and trace it back to this.
Yeah, you really could.
They invented the sound that lasted for the next decade at least.
I would say that, yeah.
Yeah, the powerful power chords, that loud guitar.
Those very crisp leads.
Yes. The drum lines that were not incredibly difficult, but they were just in your face. They were just booming. I mean, you get up and you can almost dance to some of this in a way. But it was earth-shattering rock and roll at the time.
And what you're kind of touching on is how well produced this album is.
Oh yeah,
everything is crisp and clear.
Yes, Robert John Mutt Lang. Yep. It's hard to believe that this is the guy that then went on and did Hysteria and Shania Twain. But this was some of his.
The second one, quite literally, actually.
He did.
Since he married Shania Twain shortly thereafter.
Yes.
Did he?
Yes.
Mutt Lang, very. Wow.
Yeah, we talked about this when we talked about this album. Yeah, and for Brian Johnson, this being his first album out with this band, it was a home run.
Yeah.
Fans didn't know what to expect. I mean, Bon Scott had died at that point. You think the band's dead, and in every sense of reality, you would think, well, the lead singer is gone. How do you move on?
Well, that's it. He had such big shoes to fill.
Yes. And he came in and he blew everybody away where it's like, oh, okay. The band can stay named AC/DC. I don't think there was ever any real controversy. Like when you switched, David Lee and Sammy, everyone, I prefer this, prefer that. Everyone's they just went. There was no split. It was just this was AC/DC with Bon. This is AC/DC with Brian, and they just move on.
It would have been really easy to go out and audition singers and try to get somebody who sounded like Bon Scott. They didn't. They deliberately went in a different direction and totally changed their sound. At least changed the sound of the vocals dramatically. It's like you said. It's the Hagar versus David Lee Roth argument.
Right.
People can debate which one is better. But it was a bold choice to go out and do something different, and it fucking worked as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. I mean, they were never my absolute favorites, but, I can't deny what they did.
I can't deny that this song was in rotation for me.
Oh, yeah.
Ages ago.
Oh, yeah.
I outplayed this cassette easily.
Yeah, Hell's Bells. God, that got a lot of play for me.
Oh, yeah.
Fuck yeah.
All right, so let's take some shots at it.
Now, on the downside, I just said that the Basement Tapes gets a little long and repetitive and drawn out. So does this. I mean, there are a lot of these songs that they have clearly settled on their sound, and this is what we do, and we're just going to do it over and over and over again. Now, you can get away with being a one-trick pony if it's a really good trick, but this does get a little old after a while.
AC/DC formula. This is my dick. This is my dick. Yep, this is my dick. Yeah.
AC/DC, at least this era of AC/DC, it's a lot easier to take in single format than album format.
True.
Yeah, incredibly misogynistic. But
yeah, just a bit.
That's another thing. Yeah.
But they're suggestive. Take a slice of your pie or whatever.
Yeah, but dude, it was like 12-year-old suggestive.
It was. But I mean, they weren't blatantly dropping it out there. It was at least somewhat, I won't say poetic, but it was at least, it was not creative. Clever. It was at least clever.
I think it tried to be clever mostly, and sometimes it was, sometimes it wasn't.
There's some stuff that definitely didn't age well. One review pointed me back and reminded me of the lyric, "Don't you struggle, don't you fight, don't you worry, because it's your turn tonight."
Oh, God.
Yeah. That's got Me Too written all over it.
That's not funny. Yeah, well,
all right.
It's not. You're right.
Yep. All right, so we are ready to vote. I am first. I got to go with AC/DC. Dave?
I like it. I'm going to go back to better in single form than album form. I actually think I'm going to go with Dylan on this one.
Okay. Scott?
I'm going to break this, and I'm just going to say Back in Black.
All right. AC/DC moves on 2-1.
And now for commercials that no one asked for. Mamaloney has a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R. Mamaloney has a second name. It's M-A-Y-E-R. Oh, I love to eat it every day. And if you ask me why, I say, 'cause Oscar Mayer has a way with B-O-L-O-G-N-A. Yes, oh yes it does. You just make it sound so nasty, baby.
All right, so Dave, bring us into the next matchup.
All right, so the very first Beatles album ever released in the United States, Meet the Beatles, shot to #1 and stayed there for 11 weeks, losing its top spot, only to be immediately replaced by the second album from the Beatles released in the United States. Meanwhile, Raising Hell, the album that brought hip-hop to the masses, gave us the first rap-rock ultra hit, not to mention tracksuits, Adidas kicks without laces, and Kangol hats. And if you're interested, you can hear us talk a lot more about Meet the Beatles on Season 1, Episode 4, and Raising Hell on Season 1, Episode 2.
Dave?
Yeah.
Did you say Kangles?
Kangol.
Oh.
Kangol.
Oh, okay. Not
yes,
not
Kankle hats. Kankle hats, yes.
I just heard Kankle hats.
It's a niche in the fashion industry, but
it could be.
It is very popular.
Makes sense.
Let's start with Run-DMC on this one.
Yeah.
Dave, lead us in.
Oh, just the coordination and the synchronization and the timing with these guys finishing each other's sentences and going back and forth word for word. I mean, this opens with sort of their take on some children's nursery rhymes. And just, they literally, I mean, I can't say it more than I just did, I guess. They're literally every other word. They're going back and forth. And it's the amount of practice that they had to put into that. This is not freestyle rap. You can't do this stuff freestyle, but it's just phenomenal to listen to. And then it's a very minimalist album. Jam Master Jay, who's doing the beats in the background, kind of dials it way back, but there's just enough complexity there to be interesting without actually distracting from the vocal part.
I think this was like rap when in its one of its more pure forms.
This was the rap album that got into the mainstream.
Yeah.
This was the one that all of a sudden broke through, and right. I really think that the collaboration with Aerosmith is what really introduced rap and hip-hop to the white kids.
Oh, yeah, all the white kids. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I don't think they knew, and then from this, then the Beastie Boys.
Right.
I agree. And the other sort of impact of that, not only did it sort of blow rap out into a broader audience, it really saved Aerosmith.
It really did.
When this collaboration happened, Aerosmith's career was could have gone either way, and this really brought Aerosmith back to the forefront and saved their career too. So not really what they intended to do, but when you think about the impact of the album, you kind of have to count that as well.
Also the fashion impact.
Yes, the Cankle hats.
Cankle hats.
The Adidas shoes.
The shoes. Always with the shoes. But
they made Adidas shoes so popular, they ended up getting a $1.6 million endorsement deal from the company.
There you go.
Also, and also not their intent when they wrote the song. I mean,
right.
It's just...
Yeah, they were singing about their favorite shoes.
Right.
I mean, it really did put name brands into music.
Which continues to this day. I mean, it's any reasonably successful hip hop artist now. It's only a matter of time before they start a fashion line. C.E.G. Kanye.
Yeah.
And my lower regions.
Yes. Okay. So
the other thing is, just in terms of the influence of later hip hop acts, I don't know if you have a Beastie Boys without this album.
No, you don't.
No, because the Beastie Boys then took the back and forth.
Yeah.
But I think
Corey,
did
it with three of them.
That I think, Corey, then plays back to your point about expanding hip hop to white audiences too.
Yeah.
Because I think that's a direct link, and you can show that they launched an entirely new act of all white rappers that were basically doing the same thing.
Yeah, License to Ill was on heavy rotation in my middle school. I remember that, and right next to Raising Hell, which I think came out a year or two ahead of License to Ill.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
Now, it's not all sunshine and roses. There are some low points on this. There's a couple of points where the mix is not great. For example, there's a song where the drums get a little tinny and the vocals drop down on a song that is, ironically enough, titled Perfection. Not great. There's another song, Hit and Run, that's all beatboxing that, frankly, I probably could have done without. But again, these are minor criticisms in the scope of a larger album that is mostly fantastic.
And at the time, this was really, really innovative and new. So
it was. Okay, up against Beat the
Beatles.
Meet the Beatles. Beat the Beatles.
I want to beat your meat. Hand.
I got a story I could tell, but I'm holding back.
Right when you drop the needle of I want to hold your hand. I mean, now most everyone had already been listening to this song on the radio, and you pick up the album and you put this song on, and it blows you away. You're like, what is this? This is something new. This is, I kind of compare it to when you first heard Smells Like Teen Spirit. You knew, yep, there's a new form of music coming, and this is what it is.
Right.
And I mean, it's interesting that we're pairing up against Run-DMC's Raising Hell, because this was, you heard this, you went, yep, this is a new form of music. This is where we're going. And this is when the Beatles just, it was a tsunami.
A lot of what was on the rock charts in the U.S. at the time was slightly modified versions of traditional 12-bar blues.
Right.
And this was the first time that a lot of American audiences heard a rock act that was doing something different, that was drawing on, not that blues wasn't black music as well, but drawing on black R&B, black soul concepts and pulling it in. And yeah, it just, nobody knew what to make of this, and it set the template. There is no British invasion without this album.
That's true.
No.
Period.
Very true.
I mean, Elvis was doing covers. This was a band that was now writing their own stuff, bringing their own harmonies, bringing their whole sound, the guitars, the drums. I mean, they're just, before when we had Elvis, the drummer and the guitar player were almost, they were there, but they always felt secondary. This is when the Beatles brought it, they went, no. This is an entire band. This was a band that inspired people. You want to go back to Gene Simmons. This was a band that inspired people to pick up an instrument.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, this also importantly, I think, is the music with the Beatles was just as important as the lyrics. Both sides of that coin.
Tight musically.
Yeah. Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Musically.
Yeah, very tight. And it was just as important. So, the guitar lines, the bass lines, everything just fit.
No, this comes down to George Martin.
True.
You know, the producer. This is the guy that made. I really think when they call him the fifth Beatle, they're not kidding. This is the guy that took their music, and we don't know exactly what he did in the studio. We hear the final product.
Right.
We don't know what the original product was. And I mean, usually, what they would record in days on especially some of these early ones, if not,
Right.
And so what they came in with and what they left with can't be too different than something you spend months on. But I have to think that George Martin cleaned up here, touched up there, said, cut this, add this. And I mean, he plays on the album too.
Does he?
Yeah, I think he plays. I think it was on the Wikipedia. He plays like the organ on a couple of songs.
Wow, really?
And piano. Yeah,
I didn't realize that either.
I didn't know that either.
So yes, calling him a fifth Beatle is not hyperbole.
The Beatles.
Yeah, I'm not sure when you think about just albums that have had influence. I'm not sure how much more influential you can get than debut of the band that became one of the most influential acts in musical history. I mean, that's
True.
This is not the Beatles. I mean, for folks who are not into the Beatles, this is not the Beatles that you hear people rave about. To be perfectly legit, when you hear, because I do think sometimes that people hear, oh my God, the Beatles changed everything. The Beatles changed everything, and they go back and listen to this, and it's kind of like it's a mid-'60s pop song. What's the big deal? This is not the Beatles at their best.
Yeah,
you have to go a few more albums in before you start getting them kind of innovating a little bit more and really pushing the envelope. But that doesn't change the fact that at this point, to Cory's point earlier, it was radically different than what was on the scene at the time.
Agreed.
I mean, at the time we've talked about before, you had songwriters out there and artists would go and they would buy these songs, and you'd have producers going, okay, I want this artist, and they would pair them up with songs. It's like, this is what we want you to produce. This is, we had someone that had a specific look, so we got specific songs to go with their specific look. I mean, the Beatles brought everything. They brought their own look. They brought their own instruments. They brought their own songs, and they made their own sound. Yes, based upon other R&B and what was happening in America, but they fine-tuned it. They turned it around, and they blasted us with it.
Right, that new template for the white boys, so to speak.
So to speak.
All
okay,
right.
So, yep. Dave, you're first in the votes.
This is a hard one because I don't want to give it to the Beatles just because it's the Beatles. Because honestly, if we're going to do that, we could all just declare this number one and go home. But
there's that.
Looking specifically at these two albums side by side, I do think that the Beat the Beatles did have a bigger, even just like in the Raising Hell, we said sort of set the template for rap in for about 10 years. If I think about the first 10 years after Meet the Beatles, same thing, except I want to give the slight edge to Meet the Beatles for the next 10 years of influence. So I think I got to go with the Liverpudlians.
Okay. Scott, you're next.
I'm going to give it to Raising Hell.
Okay.
All right. Comes down to you, Cory.
Beatles.
Fuck y'all.
No,
you're right.
They were both, like I said, it's interesting that these two were paired up because of the way they both changed a genre of music.
Yeah, exactly.
But when it comes to inspiration and it comes to lasting through the test of time,
fine.
It's you don't have to change your vote.
No,
it's fine.
I'm
it's the Beatles.
He voted. It doesn't matter. It's over.
I voted. It is too late. Oh no!
Yes. Okay.
You will pay through your thing I don't talk about anymore.
Okay, on to the middle part now.
Welcome to the middle part. We're in the middle part. Yeah.
That's a good idea. We do need a theme song for the middle part. I kind of like that.
Yeah, we do.
We got a theme song for the middle part. We're singing a theme song. Yeah.
It's kind
It was sort of like
Okay.
80s movie training montage music.
Oh my God.
Reaching out for the middle part.
or kind of like an A-Team theme. Da 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 da.
Bum, 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 bum. Yes. Okay. So welcome to the middle part. We are going to discuss the inductees for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
God.
Now, make note, to be eligible for nomination, an individual artist or band must have released its first commercial recording at least 25 years prior to the year of nomination. So, and this year, Dave, want to read them off? The performers?
Yeah, so we had Pat Benatar, Duran Duran, Eminem, Eurythmics. Eminem's more than 25 years, good God. Eurythmics, Dolly Parton, Lionel Richie, Carly Simon, and Judas Priest that wasn't nominated as a performer, but got the Musical Excellence Award.
Is that like a participation award?
Does that even make fucking sense, though?
Yeah, I mean,
really?
Well, actually, Cory, you just said something that kind of sums up my feelings about the Rock Hall of Fame just generally. You called it a participation award. I never paid a lot of attention to this because to me it's always seemed more about, gee, whose ass do we have to kiss this year? Who's been around long enough?
Yes.
they slighted Rush for so many years.
They did.
Even, okay, top of this list, Pat Benatar should have been in there already.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. I mean, you know, they put Joan Jett in, which I'm not opposed to, but you should have had Pat Benatar in there before.
Agreed.
It's like last year or the year before they put The Cure in. I'm sorry, Duran Duran should have come before them.
Agreed.
Eminem, I don't know. You know what? There's a couple of his albums that are in the top 500, so maybe we'll get around to them. I'm not incredibly familiar
Will the
with
real
them.
Slim Shady please stand up? Stand up. I am the real Slim Shady.
I do like a lot of Eminem in terms of the way he sort of constructs a lyric. He was one of the first guys I heard that did this thing where rather than just the last syllable of line one rhyme with the last syllable of rhyme two, he would do these sort of complex internal rhymes where you'd listen to a line, and then when you got to the second line, you realized that damn near every syllable in the sentence lined up with the previous.
We saw that with Rakim.
Rakim was another example of that same thing. Eminem was just the first time I saw it. A lot of Eminem stuff, though, I mean, it was controversial when it came out, and it really hasn't aged well. A lot of sexism, a lot of homophobia, not great.
Yeah, agreed. But I think in a way too, his stuff though is much more in the spirit of rock and roll than a lot of other people who were inducted.
Well, yeah. I mean, let's talk about Dolly Parton. Even Dolly Parton said that she did not want it. Even Dolly Parton came out with a statement and said, "I don't really want to be considered for this because I'm not a rock artist."
Yeah.
And frankly, I think she's right. I give her some credit for integrity for making that statement.
I love Dolly, but
Because, well, let's put it this way. Dolly may not have been a rock artist, but she inspired a lot of rock artists. I think we've said this here before.
She did, but don't they? But then I think we talked earlier. They also had this early influence category, right? So that maybe that would have made more sense.
It would have made a lot more sense to have her as an influence than as a performer because she never did a rock and roll album.
Yeah.
She's country. I mean, we look at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They tend to cover, I don't know, have there been country artists inducted? I don't really follow it. It's
why is Judas Priest not in the Country Music Hall of Fame?
well, exactly
Right.
Yeah. Why is Lionel Richie not in the Country Music Hall of Fame?
Yeah.
Why
Right.
is Pat Benatar not there? Come on.
If you're gonna call it the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I agree. Like,
yeah, the Rock Hall is a little fucked up on who and what they choose to consider rock and roll. So frankly, fuck them. But that's just me.
again, whose ass do we have to kiss this year?
right. I mean, there should be a hip hop Hall of Fame then.
Let's call it a musical Hall of Fame.
There you go.
Dolly Parton, especially since COVID started, has kind of become like America's favorite grandma, and with good reason, by the way. She does a ton of good work for charity. She's had this one charity where she's like sent free books to school children. I think she sent out like 500,000 books or some ridiculous number like that for school kids to encourage them to read. There's a lot to love about Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
From a very young age, Dolly was inspiring boys to have motorboat dreams. Just saying.
And then we talk about some of the people who didn't get in. While you were busy inducting Dolly Parton into the Rock Hall of Fame, you overlook Beck, Kate Bush, Devo, New York Dolls, Rage Against the Machine, Tribe Called Quest. It doesn't. Some of these other ones, in my mind, are much more deserving of a. And again, I love Dolly Parton, but some of these are a lot more deserving of Dolly Parton for something called the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I mean, absolutely, Devo. I mean, if you were going to bring in again, like The Cure last year, or they brought in, did Depeche Mode make it in? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I think they did.
Without the
I
New
think
York
they did.
Dolls, we wouldn't.
Again, I don't
have
pay a lot of
acts
attention
like
to it.
Alice Cooper or the Ramones, or they influence so many people.
Yes, I would agree. And with Eminem, I think I would have picked A Tribe Called Quest.
Oh,
first.
easily, yes. And really Rage Against the Machine out there.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Rage Against the Machine. I mean, if you were going to hone in on a rap
Yeah.
act that qualifies also as a rock
Absolutely.
act, Rage is the clear example of that.
Very much so. Yes.
Musical excellence for Judas Priest. It feels like a backwards compliment as well. Not only just the participation. Scott has left the room.
I guess they also gave an award to the founder of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Is that right?
Yeah.
Alan Grubman. Wasn't he like the bad guy in Die Hard? Alan Grubman?
Grubman, yes. Gruber.
Gruber. Oh, Hans Gruber.
Hans Gruber, yes. Thank you. We both had
Played by Alan Rickman, so it's an understandable.
Yes. Yeah, and he represented a lot of acts too, but yeah. I don't absolutely... Well, I've never really agreed with the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I mean, the cool thing about it is when they have their jams at the end, and you have everybody up on the stage together. I mean, we have the Prince playing, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and just wailing on the guitar.
Yes,
that is a
people out there, if you have not heard the While My Guitar Gently Weeps from the Rock Index, you've got not just Prince. I think Tom Petty is up on that stage. You have Danny Harrison, George Harrison's son, is up on the stage playing. They just basically put together this super group as kind of a tribute to George Harrison and his induction.
And one other note is for musical excellence, they also brought in Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. The only reason I'm bringing them up is we discussed them with Janet Jackson a few shows ago.
Control.
We've ended this discussion. We don't agree. I'm happy for some of these artists that they got recognized, but
I don't agree with some of these choices, but I also don't care. I mean, it's totally irrelevant to me.
Same. It is. I feel like they should call it the Musical Hall of Fame anymore.
You should. They really should. It should be the Musical Hall of Fame. Then it would make more sense. Then you can have every bloody type of music in there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know what? Let's
quit trying to say, they deserve to be there. Well, no.
I'm like, then we can induct Mozart and Brahms and Beethoven.
Oh, fuck
Yeah, those guys don't get enough attention.
They really don't.
So we're done with the middle of the show. And now it's time to go.
The middle part has an outro, too.
We're done with the middle of the show. We're done with the middle of the show. Bye-bye, motherfuckers. We're going to sodomize you all the way down.
Let's go to the next round.
Yes,
Dave.
let us talk. Right.
All right. Conceived as a visual album with every song accompanied by a short film, Beyonce's self-titled debut is a deeply personal exploration of feminism, intimacy, autonomy, and creative freedom. Meanwhile, widely regarded as John Mayer's best album, Continuum was a deliberate attempt to shake off the trappings of top 40 radio in favor of Mayer's preferred genre of 70s soul and guitar-driven blues. We explore Beyonce further back on Season 1, Episode 6 of the podcast, and Continuum back on Season 1, Episode 3.
Okay, Beyonce.
Yeah, baby.
It's a good album.
Yeah.
It is, and she's open and honest. This is we are seeing this with a lot of the female artists that Rolling Stone has chosen.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have many that are, these mousy women just doing it. I think Dusty Springfield would be the only one, but that's because that album was from the 60s. And even then she did take on some songs that were not exactly revolutionary, but I do think that with the ones we have seen that are post 90s or 80s and 90s, because we did cover Chrissie Hynde.
Yep.
They are independent.
Yes.
They don't need men, and quite honestly, they have sex lives too, and they're not afraid to tell you about it.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And they can be just as nasty as the boys are.
And she talks about that thing that I don't talk about.
We said it, I think, back when we talked about this album. Beyonce likes fucking.
Yep.
And ain't nothing wrong with that.
You know it.
All right. So other than eating Beyonce's Skittles, the other thing I like about this album is it is at points. I should say it. I should stress at points because I'm going to come back to this in a minute. It is very experimental at points. There are points on this where she breaks away from like the standard R&B soul sound that I think most people associate her with, and you get songs like Haunted, which have this really fantastic beat in the background. There were some others on here where she's just playing around with like piano sounds and guitar sounds. And when I talk about the samples too, the other interesting thing was because she wanted this to be so personal, the way she sort of framed this up with recordings of herself. She had grown up in the spotlight. You know, she had been in childhood beauty contests and childhood singing competitions, and so she got samples of these like competitions of her as a little kid and blended them in with the music to kind of frame up the songs. And then as a really nice touch at the end, she ends with a sample of her own kid singing along with one of the songs. It's just a really nice kind of storytelling is probably the wrong word because it doesn't really tell a complete story, but it's just a nice frame up of sort of, this is what I grew up. This is what I'm going to try to prevent my daughter from having to grow up and deal with myself.
There you go.
Yeah, you heard the Star Search with Ed McMahon in there.
Yeah.
Ed McMahon.
The one sample that I really liked on this is she took a portion of a TED talk from, I'm going to fuck up the name, so forgive me. I don't mean any disrespect to anybody who hears this, but Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie gave a TED talk on why everyone should be a feminist, and there's like a paragraph long quote that Beyonce includes on this album sampled from that talk, and it really sums up the entire album just in that one little 1 minute stretch.
Fair.
So I liked it. I honestly, I was trying to think back. I think I might have been a little harsh towards it the first time we listened to it, but I think I've come around now a little bit. I
don't think we were.
No,
I think we all agreed it was good. And I mean,
It
we
is
had
good.
just and it
Oh,
was
you know what I
paired
hated?
up.
Oh, I know what it was. I hated the Destiny's Child album. That was
Exactly. We had
Right.
Destiny's Child, and we had this one, and we could definitely tell where the talent was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, so let's go on the con side. We've now that I just mentioned her, we've talked about Chrissy Hine, Liz Phair, Janet Jackson, Alanis, and there's nothing really that new to the female independence theme. She's just building upon it. She's standing on the shoulders of other giants that have been there. So it's like, yeah, you're doing this, and it's Tuesday.
Yeah,
So that's true, but I'm going to push back on that a little bit because in my mind that's a little bit like saying, well, there's been a lot of albums about love songs, and so you can't make an album about love songs anymore. You can't. I mean, it's some of these themes are universal, and there's nothing. It's not that somebody else picks up and gives you their take on something. I don't know that.
Good, good point. I'm not saying that it was. I'm just trying to say this wasn't something new.
no,
Right.
not
You know,
at
I
all.
didn't want to.
She was not an innovator in this space. That is true.
Certainly
That's
not.
that's what I'm saying. She's not an innovator in the space. Yes, that you know what, I am all for any of them coming out and just being that brazen and being that honest.
Right.
There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's great. It's actually a good counterbalance to when we talked about AC/DC.
Right.
All the hair bands,
Yeah.
all of them. They are the perfect counterbalance, and you need more of that.
Right.
You do. You really do when it comes to that because, I mean, she brought her Skittles to the yard and she scattered them all over for everybody to pick up. So, just saying.
Happy Easter, everybody.
Yes, she didn't hide them. It was right there in the middle.
Any color you want.
No. Pink is the color. Guess the flavor. That was the line, I think.
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
yes, that's
sorry.
it.
Pink is the flavor. Solve the riddle. Maybe that's the actual line. Anyway.
Whatever.
Yep.
All right.
How many licks does it take to get to the center of Beyonce's Tootsie Pop?
Center of her skittle.
Let's ask Mr. Jay-Z Owl.
1, 2,
Three.
3. Oh boy.
On that
Anything
note,
else?
Everybody
Or we-
just we just aged ourselves there. Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Anyway, speaking of pussies, John Mayer.
Right. That twat. He's a twat monkey. And he's just a twat.
But he is a brilliant guitar player.
Yeah, fair enough. He is.
He really
is. A
is.
phenomenal guitar
He
player.
will make you weep with how good he is.
On this album, I particularly love the solo on Gravity. It's one of these. You know what? I'm actually going to save this comment until we get to a later round, and I'll come back to this point in a minute. Let's just say for the moment, I love the solo on Gravity. I also love what he did with Bold as Love by Hendrix. He stripped some of the distortion out. It's just a little bit of an overdriven guitar, but man, he just nails it. Every single note. I don't know how he does it. Well, actually, I do know he does it. He practiced like fuck when he was a kid, but a lot more than I did.
That's how you do it. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, he's a phenomenal guitar player. He's actually, when he puts his mind to it, he's a very talented songwriter too, which you hear a lot on this album.
True.
Slow Dancing in a Burning Room is a phenomenally crafted song.
This was an album on my second pass this time I really appreciated a lot more, especially now that I was listening for Bold as Love, since you brought that up when we covered the album. You're like, oh yeah, it was on the Continuum album. I was like, oh, so when we came back around, I made sure to pay attention. And yes, I have a much greater appreciation for John Mayer now as a musician.
Yes.
And I think Dave said it best. It's what he wrote in here. It's an incredibly consistent album from start to finish, and he is absolutely correct. It is well done. I don't feel like I sit there and go, that was a low point. I felt like it was properly produced. What songs were on there were put in the right order, the mood, the feel from start to end. I was impressed.
Yeah, it was a hell of an album.
Now it is, I mean, on the con side, Cory, I think you jotted down this note. It's John Mayer.
It's John Mayer.
True, yes.
And this is a little like the Kanye thing. John Mayer is a giant douchebag at times. But I'm trying to focus purely on the music in the album, not the guy personally. So I'll just leave it at that.
But if you don't want to, he was a twat. Oh, or is he's still alive, right?
Yeah.
He is still alive.
Okay, I'm just checking. I sometimes I'm wrong.
I think he's actually kind of toned it down a little bit. I mean, he was kind of launched into the stratosphere at age 23, and then he proceeded to do a couple of interviews where he said some really questionable things, and
they don't age well.
Well, they didn't. I mean, he got pushed back at the time for some of the shit he said in interviews at the time, but I'll counter that by saying he was
23.
I'm awfully glad that when I was 23, people weren't shoving microphones in front of my face, because who knows what I would have said.
Oh, God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, my mouth back then, it was a lot
back
worse
then.
than it is. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. Right? Crazy, huh?
All right. So
that's crazy talk.
It's time to vote. Scott, who do you pick?
Oh, God. That's tough, because as much as I like the Beyonce album, I'm going to give it to John Mayer, because just it felt like a more solid effort.
I have the second vote, and I am also choosing John Mayer.
Yeah, this is a tough one.
Yeah,
these are both two good albums, but I think at the end of the day, I'm right there with you. I think I got to go. All three of us.
Yeah, it wasn't that he was a shitty white boy. It's just that he was really good at being a songwriter and player there. And
musically, it was much better done.
Yeah, it really was.
I mean, you've got real musicians.
Right.
You've got there wasn't a lot of samples. I don't know.
All right.
The musician in me is just gonna lean that way. And there was. I mean, I'm not knocking Beyonce at all. It's just everything about it just seemed very done before.
And now more commercials that nobody asked for. What rolls downstairs, a loader in pairs, rolls over your neighbor's dog. What's great for a snack, it fits on your back. It's log, log, log. It's log, it's log. It's big, it's heavy, it's wood. It's log, it's log. It's better than bad, it's good. Everyone wants a log. You're gonna love it, log. Come on and get your log. Everyone needs a log, 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 log. Log from Blammo.
And now the last one for this time, and then
we
are on our final matchup of the day.
Yes.
So, we start with the album that got Brian Wilson labeled as a genius. The Beach Boys' Pet Sounds took the former purveyors of kitschy surf rock into experimental territory, propping up their trademark harmonies with a massive wall of sound. On the other hand, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon is considered a progressive rock classic and the band's first concept album, with every song revolving around themes of madness and those things that cause it. We talked a lot more about Pet Sounds back on Season 1, Episode 6 of the podcast, and even though I wasn't there, you can go back and hear Scott and Cory talking more about Dark Side of the Moon all the way back on the very first episode, although, as Cory said, don't do that.
Yeah,
Don't
just
do
don't
that.
bother. Don't bother.
Yeah. All right, Dave. Since you weren't here for the first time about Dark Side, why don't you lead off?
Yeah, so this is, what can I say that I didn't say in the intro? This is considered a prog rock masterpiece. It was one of the best performing albums of all time. I saw a statistic that if you look at 1 out of every 14 people in the United States under the age of 50 has owned a copy of this record.
Right.
That's how many copies it sold. It has spent hundreds and hundreds of weeks. I think the last, it keeps, every once in a while it will drop out of the Billboard Top 200 only to come right back up again. When you add up all the weeks it's been in the Billboard Top 200, I think it's like over 1,200 weeks that it's shown up in the Billboard Top 200 since it was released. It's phenomenal. It's a collection of great songs. It's not just a collection of great songs. It's a sonic painting. I mean, they bring in sound effects. There's the jackhammer at the beginning, the cash register and money, and the clocks on time, and the heartbeat at both the beginning and the end. They went around Abbey Road conducting little interviews with people they found hanging around Abbey Road and included little audio clips of that in there. And they really just painted an entire landscape from start to finish. Cory, since we are telling people don't go back and listen to the first album, the first podcast. One of the things, Cory, that you said on that first episode was you have a hard time listening to any one track of this by itself.
Right.
That this is a single cohesive piece from start to finish.
It is. You said it. It is a work of art, and it is something that has to be taken in as a whole. I mean, I rarely say this. I say this about songs. I'll hear a song, I'll go, no, that's a perfect song, beginning to end. They got it right, everything they did. But this is a perfect album. Everything about this fit together. The moods, the structures, the transitions from one song into the next. I think you put it in there. There's no break. There's no gaps between the songs.
Yeah, they weren't the first one to do the gapless album concept, but this is generally considered one of the most well executed gapless albums.
Well, that was a big thing in prog. I mean, you had these songs that were 20 minutes long. I mean, you had Supper's Ready by Genesis that's like 22 minutes, and they go through all sorts of different, like Dark Side. There's different movements. It's almost like a classical piece.
Right.
To where there's this movement, then this movement, and they come back on the theme, the heartbeat you mentioned, the beginning at the end. Perfect bookmarks. Everything about this worked, and it is an incredible major feat in engineering that when they were mixing this, they had every band member and everybody in that studio working the controls on the soundboard. Bring this up, bring this down, bring this up, bring this down. What it took to do this album, I cannot even fathom.
On 1973 technology, especially.
Exactly.
Agreed.
Yeah, they're not sitting around with, GarageBand or Pro Tools on a Mac recording all the tracks.
No, this was all on tape, kids.
Yeah, what probably took them months would probably take somebody a week with the Pro Tools. Or even the free stuff we have now.
Right. Oh, that's very true. I'm not even sure you could. Well, you'd be hard pressed to do something like this now. But as I was telling somebody earlier today, I said to me, Dark Side is just, it's a masterwork. It's an opus. The whole thing, as you said, Cory, taken as a whole, because it's just so beautiful from start to finish. It's kind of one of those perfect albums, and I rarely say that about anything. But this, yeah.
This is also hugely impactful for their career because this is Floyd finally figuring out the formula after Sid Barrett leaves.
True.
Or after Sid Barrett goes nuts and gets kicked out of the band, I should be more accurate.
He lost his mind a little.
They kind of wandered in the desert for a while. I said this when we talked about Piper at the Gates of Dawn a few shows back.
Right.
They didn't really know what to do with themselves. They did a couple of movie soundtracks. They tried a couple things. They produced Uma Guma for some god-awful reason. And this was the first album where they said, okay, I think we figured out what we're going to be now. We're going to be a concept act, and every album from this point forward is going to have a central theme around it, and at least up until Waters leaves the group in 82, 83.
And this is why we can't have nice things. But, there it is.
Yeah, so before this was obscured by
Adam-
clouds, but I was looking
Well,
for
that was one of the movie soundtracks.
right, but Metal was the
Yeah.
was the album MEDDLE.
Yeah,
Yeah,
metal.
you had
And
Adam
that's-
Hart Mother, you had Metal, and then but Metal and Adam Hart Mother, again, it's a collection of songs, but it's not a collection of songs that ties together in any way like this.
Right. The track I was thinking of, and it's on Metal, is Echoes. It takes up the entire second side. It's
Right.
23 minutes long.
Oh, God.
And I think, yes. And that's where actually Andrew Lloyd Webber ripped off his bit for Phantom of the Opera. If you listen to it
Wow.
closely,
really?
you'll hear it.
Now.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Yes. I think it was a stepping stone
Oh, yeah.
to this album of, yes, we can put these different pieces and these different thoughts together and make it one cohesive thing. It's gapless, like Dave said. It's gapless tracks, but they just transition into each other so well.
Right.
You come out of Money, you fall into Us and Them, almost, seamlessly.
So I think the first major pop album to do gapless was Sgt. Pepper's, and they did it primarily with a lot of crossfading, and it sounds like they taking two songs and crossfading them at
Right.
a lot of points.
Right.
This is the gapless work on this. You could almost convince yourself, if you didn't know better, that they're in the studio literally playing from one song right into the next.
Radio stations back in the day had fun with this album because they could fade in and out on something, and you wouldn't quite know if you didn't have the album,
Right.
where it started or began or ended, and that was interesting.
All right, so let's try to take some shots at it.
So I tried to think about things that I would criticize on this, and one was I guess it's probably the third track, called On the Run, where they're basically in the studio fiddling around with a sequencing synthesizer, and it's 3 minutes of, frankly, nothingness. I don't know why they included it. I mean, it's one of these things where I could see them standing around the studio going, wow, that sounds kind of cool, but why they thought it was worthy of turning it into a song and putting it on the album, I don't. And it's the one piece that I can't say ties back to anything, honestly. This central theme, again, if the central theme here is things that cause stress, things that can cause people to go crazy.
That song does, it creates tension. It creates that kind of
True.
stress.
Oh, I agree.
Oh, so your point is the song makes people go crazy.
It's a stressful song to listen to. Yeah.
That's true.
It is stressful, and I think you roll out of that into
that goes into Time.
No, I thought Time precedes it.
No.
And then
There's kind of like a big explosion thing at the end of On the Run,
Right.
and then you
Yeah,
silence, and then the clocks
time.
start coming in.
Tick, 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 tick.
Okay.
Right.
What's the one with the female singer?
What is nothing?
Oh, that's
Oh, The Great
I don't
Gig in
have
the
it.
Sky.
Great Gig in the Sky, which is like the last track on the first side, I think.
That's like one of my favorites to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Even that high vocal, which I believe her name is Claire Torrey. So we go back to the Mary Clayton in
Give Me Shelter.
Give Me Shelter, and then just this haunting voice. It's absolutely beautiful. In fact, when this song comes on, if you line it up with The Wizard of Oz, which I know
God.
we talked about, that song happens during the tornado. Which just makes it just really, really cool.
The vocal performance on that, I saw Floyd live a couple of times, the post-Waters era Floyd live a couple of times. I've seen Roger Waters live a few times. They've included Great Gig in pretty much every set list I've seen them play live. I've yet to hear them bring out a touring vocalist that can match the performance on that album.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna find it unless you go snooping around opera houses.
The other big criticism that I've heard about this album is that it's pretentious, which is, well, yeah, it's prog rock.
Yeah,
That's kind of the
whatever.
point.
Yeah.
You can say that about pretty much any prog rock album.
You can
ever
say
made.
that about anything, especially if it's music. It's very pretentious. Oh yeah, well, go fuck yourself. Whatever.
You want to hear pretentious? Listen to Summer Waters' later work.
You want to hear pretentious? Listen to Pet Sounds. Oh, sorry.
And here we are. I think
Well,
we can.
on that note,
Yep. So, Pet Sounds, the Beach Boys. Interesting that these two paired up because they were both tremendous innovators in the studio. Yep. I think Pet Sounds was one of our first introductions of making the studio a member of the band, to where the sound that came out in the end couldn't have been captured live without studio hacks or studio tricks being done, bringing in all the different instrumentation. David listed this. So you had like, the harpsichord, the organ, the bass, clarinet, string bass, sleigh bells, French horn. It's an incredibly good album. I can see why Rolling Stone ranked it as high as they did.
It's an incredibly good experiment. I don't know if I say it's an incredibly good album. That's the distinction I'm drawing.
Okay, there are some strong tracks on there, then there are some very weak tracks on there. I would not call this a perfect album.
Oh, no, not by any stretch of the imagination, no. I think there's like two. I was listening to this again in anticipation of recording this, and there's two tracks. I think it's two tracks on there that are instrumentals. They work the best because in terms of what I would criticize this album, it's Brian Wilson did a lot of innovation and experimentation with the backing instrumentation and songwriting, but where he did not innovate was the Beach Boys sound. This is a Beach Boys record just with weird instruments behind them. It's the same harmonies, it's the same. I think that's the drawback here.
And I think at the time that's what the record company wanted. They still wanted a Beach Boys album, which
it backfired spectacularly because this album did not sell when it first came out.
No, it didn't. And it was probably because he went for the different instrumentation and the experimentation. I mean, he still gave them the vocals. He still gave them what people came for with the Beach Boys. He just didn't give them that beach sound in the background. He didn't give them that light, bumpy, whatever, Beach Boys sound everybody knows them for. Because there's not Good Vibrations on here. There's not Help Me Rhonda. There's not those old Jan and Dean songs that they covered. Right. This is all Brian.
Yeah. I will give this album a little bit of credit in that I think it was one of the first turning points where people said, okay, rock music actually is an art form. You can actually do something in the rock genre that is worthy of actually putting down and putting down on a turntable and paying attention to, as opposed to just putting on in the background at a party. Scott's shaking his head.
I think we'll just let him cover the con side of this.
So, okay, yeah. Brian Wilson was labeled a genius. Well, yeah, I wish I had that many drugs. Because if I had that many drugs, maybe I could write something like this. And then people go, wow, he was a genius. It's because he was high. No, I'd rather have my balls flayed by a Japanese chef than listen to this album again. I mean, just fuck me. It was awful. Christ, I hated this album like so much. I mean, it's just... And I'm not kidding. I mean, really, I fucking hated that album. It was terrible. People are like, oh, it's so innovative. It's like, yeah, whatever. Fuck you, man. No, garbage, trash.
I keep it in context of when it was released and what they were able to accomplish in the studio at that time.
I'm craving Benihana all of a sudden.
Yeah. Yes.
yeah. Give me some shrimp fried. Yeah. No. I just can't. I can't stomach that fucking album.
First, I kind of commented this was like the first boy band, but I'm really kind of wrong on that because everything else that was coming out in the 60s where you had multiple male singers, the Association.
Jan and Dean were a boy band.
Jan and Dean.
The Monkees.
Yeah, Bill Medley.
Yeah.
They all were just put in front of music recorded by the Wrecking Crew.
Right, exactly. Or from the Brill Building.
They were not. Well, the Brill Building wrote it. The Wrecking Crew recorded it.
That's okay. I didn't know that's quite where you were going with it. So I'll pull back the Monkees because they did at least play their own instruments. So
and they weren't allowed to at first.
Right.
No, they weren't.
And eventually, Mike and Peter could play, and the other two eventually learned their instruments.
Yes, finally.
But they were just singers in front of another band, and on this one, they didn't even play their instruments. They were out on tour. Brian Wilson stayed behind and worked with the Wrecking Crew, worked in the studio, got all of this done, and then brought them in to sing.
So I think as a final wrap-up on this, we can all just give it to Dark Side and be done with it, right?
I really wish that we could have ended this with a little bit more suspense for the audience, but come on.
I'm sorry.
I think it's a 3-0 on this one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so that wraps us up.
You lose, Pet Sound, in your face, bitch! Yeah!
We all went with Floyd. So we will do this again on the next show where we will have 8 more rounds. And it's quite possible, depending on how long this went, you might get it in 2 chunks of 4 rounds.
Hallelujah.
So you
What
can
is it,
quote me as
Leonard
saying I was
Cohen?
misquoted.
Leonard Cohen, hallelujah, like the ducks that used to fly.
All right.
I don't have a brain in there.
Thank you all, and join us next time for more of these second rounds.
Moo, 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 moo,
Moo, moo, moo, moo, moo, moo, moo, moo, moo.
moo, 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 moo,
Moo, moo, moo, moo, moo, moo.
moo.